Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, Opie married his wife after 2 years of dating. Despite a seemingly happy start, their marriage unraveled when his wife reconnected with a high school friend, Ben, who attended their wedding. Over time, the husband discovered an ongoing affair between his wife and Ben, leading to a dramatic confrontation, public exposure, and eventual divorce. Now, let's get into the story. I, 29 male, have been married to my wife, 30 female, for almost 3 years. And before everything went to hell, it was the happiest time of my life. We were together for 2 years before we got married, and I fell headfirst in love with her. All of her friends loved me when we first met. I was brought into their friend group pretty easily, and everything felt very natural. My girlfriend would talk about a friend from high school from time to time who was in the military. We'll call him Ben. She told me that they were best friends when they were in high school and they had stayed in touch with each other over the years. I didn't get to meet him until my wedding day. My wife invited him and his wife to the wedding, not even sure if they would make it or not. He ended up cashing in a few days of his leave to attend the wedding because my wife meant so much to him. I was a little annoyed that he did that. I didn't care much about having a big wedding or making a huge statement about it being my day or anything. But when Ben walked into the venue, he kind of stole the show. Everybody from my girlfriend's side of the family was clamoring over him throughout the entire reception. It almost felt like the wedding that I paid thousands of dollars for didn't mean as much as Ben coming home for the weekend. It felt like my wife even spent the majority of our wedding reception catching up with Ben. I try not to let it bother me. I knew that he was an old friend that she hadn't seen in a while, and that was it. She had never given me any reason to think anything differently. Ben left the following Sunday, and my wife and I went on our honeymoon. The first couple of days we were gone were fantastic. I was happier than I had ever been, and I felt like the luckiest man in the world. Then she started talking about Ben again. He texted her over some pictures that he had taken at the wedding. Most of them were selfies he'd taken of both of them together. She kept showing them to me and talking about how happy she was to have seen him at the wedding. After she started telling me about all the crazy stories Ben told her while they spent all that time catching up, I was annoyed, so I ended up leaving after a while to try and forget about it by spending some time at the pool. I don't even think she noticed that I was annoyed. After about an hour, I went back upstairs to our hotel room, and my wife was naked in front of the mirror. I asked her what she was doing, and she just told me that she was changing into a swimsuit to meet me outside. After that incident during honeymoon, everything else went smoothly. We got back home and into the rhythm of our daily married life pretty quickly. I knew that my wife was talking to Ben a lot more after we returned. When I asked her about what they talked about, she said they had friendly conversations about nothing at all. Again, I didn't have much reason not to trust her, so I believed it. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit jealous of the attention she was giving him, but she married me and not him. I try not to let it bother me. A couple of years passed, and I've gotten used to hearing about Ben once or twice a week in my life. They would text each other and tag each other in memes on Facebook and things like that. As far as I was aware, they never really talked on the phone or video chatted, so it all seemed entirely platonic. I guess an important thing to note as well is that Ben was married. He married his high school sweetheart right out of college before he went into the service. I knew that my wife didn't like her at all because she was a bit of a mean girl in high school. One day my wife and I were both home and hanging out around the house when someone knocked on our door. Neither of us was expecting anyone. We thought that if anything, it was probably some canvassers trying to sign us up for voter registrations or something. I opened the door and I saw Ben standing there. My wife was on the couch behind me, looking over my shoulder to see who was there. When she saw Ben, she leaped out of her seat and ran to hug him. He grabbed her in his arms and picked her up while she wrapped her legs around him. I wasn't okay with the hug. Maybe it was me being a little bit petty, but it didn't seem like the type of hug someone would give a friend that they described as being like a brother to them. Ben's wife was right behind him, and she looked as uncomfortable with it as I did. Nevertheless, we invited them both in, and we made them some coffee so we could catch up. Ben had apparently just returned home the night before, and the first person he wanted to see after his wife was my wife. My wife was all over him in some ways. Obviously, she wasn't sitting on his lap and kissing him, but she was very interested in everything he had to say. She kept squeezing his hand when he would say something, and I noticed that it was lingering a little bit too long. We said goodbye to Ben and his wife after about an hour. After they drove off, I asked my wife about what had just happened with Ben. She didn't understand what I meant right away, but I told her that she was fawning over him while he was there, which made me uncomfortable. She told me that I was wrong for feeling that way, because Ben had just gotten back from the military where he could have died. She was just glad to see that he was alive and well. I told her that some of the things she did seemed a little conspicuous, and I didn't like it. She got very mad at me for suggesting anything could have been going on, and she stormed out. I tried to get her to come back and talk about it like adults, but she just ignored me and left. I had no idea where she went. After a few hours, I was worried about her when she didn't come home. I expected her to drive around the block a couple of times, maybe take a walk through her Target or go and get a coffee, then come back. I tried calling her, but she didn't answer. I called a few of her girlfriends, the ones that I figured she would probably go to if she needed to rant about me for a while, and none of them had seen her. I called her mom and her sister, and neither of them had heard from her either. The only other person I could think to contact was Ben, and I didn't have any of his information. All I could do was wait to talk to her whenever she came home. She didn't come home until about 9 a.m. the following morning. She looked like she was hungover, and before she said anything to me, she hopped in the shower. I asked her about where she was, and she didn't want to tell me right away. I had a strong suspicion she was at Ben's house because she wasn't anywhere else that I called. While she was in the shower, I was in the bathroom with her leaning against the counter trying to tell her about how sorry I was. I hated being in arguments with her, and I didn't want her to walk out again like she did the night before. While I was there, a text message from Ben came through on her phone. My curiosity got the better of me, so I unlocked her phone to read the message. In the message, Ben was telling my wife to lie to me about where she was the night before. He wanted her to tell me that they went to a local bar together and went back to his house where she passed out on the couch. He said that he didn't want his wife to know the truth, so they had to be careful. He didn't say what the truth was, though. The further I scrolled back, I saw several exchanges of nude pictures and intimate, explicit messages between them. It wasn't a far lead for me to assume they slept together. I kept scrolling through the messages, and I saw that their virtual affair had been going on for a very long time. It was happening before we even met. It seemed like they had hooked up a few times when Ben had been home on leave, and when he was away, they would send each other pictures and intimate. After my wife and I got married, things slowed down, and they both acknowledged it was wrong, but they continued from time to time. After he showed up to the wedding, my wife messaged him and told him how irresistible he was to her. There were talks during our honeymoon where he mentioned wanting to divorce his wife to be with her, and my wife mentioned how she wished he'd have said something sooner. And when I saw her naked in front of the mirror, it was a picture that she was taking of herself to send him. On our honeymoon, I was so furious. I had been right to be suspicious of Ben, and she made it seem like I was some monster who was trying to control her every move. She pointed the blame at me, as if she wasn't the one having an affair with a married man. My wife had lied to me and betrayed me throughout the entirety of our relationship, and I felt like my world was turned upside down. I put her phone down after sending myself some screenshots of the messages, and I went to my office to try and figure out what I wanted to do. Divorce was the only way forward for me, but I wanted to do a little something else before. When my wife got out of the shower, she told me that the following day Ben's wife was throwing together a little welcome home party for him. I thought it was the perfect time to let everybody know how much of a liar and cheater their hero was. I played it cool until the party, not letting my wife suspect that I knew anything. When the time came, my wife got all dressed up, more than she ever had for me, I might add. We went to Ben's house where the party was. About an hour into the party, the house was packed. Dozens of people showed up to thank Ben for his service to our country. When I figured the room was full enough, I airdropped about 10 screenshots of the conversations I'd taken from my wife's phone. I listened to phones chiming in the room as they all got the airdrop notification. Some people turned and looked at me as if they were questioning what I was airdropping them. A lot of people opened it, and the attention quickly turned from Ben being a hero to being a cheater. Ben's wife got the airdrop as well, and she walked up to him and slapped him in the face before rushing away in tears. The party was almost silent when everyone realized that Ben and my wife knew what happened. They were all waiting for some explosion. My wife walked up to me and quietly asked me why I would do that to her. I asked her about why she would do that to me. Then I told her that she could expect to be getting divorce papers any day. So many of her friends and the people in town were there and got the messages. On top of that, they were being shared with a lot of other people. Practically half the town knew about the affair by the end of the day. My wife wasn't going to be able to go anywhere without getting stares for people. I was back home packing my bags, and she confronted me, once again treating me like I was the bad guy for finding out that she cheated on me. I wasn't going to have it, so I just packed my bags and ignored her as I walked out. We're divorced now. Thankfully, everything was so new in the marriage that we hadn't bought a house or anything like that. It was easy for us to separate from each other. Ben and his wife got divorced, and his wife ended up taking the house and most of their assets. From what I can tell through town rumors, Ben and my ex-wife tried dating for a while after everything happened. Things didn't really seem to work out with them because they broke up after a few months. I guess they just liked the idea of being together more than actually doing it. Today's second story. In this story, OP met his girlfriend on a dating app 4 years ago. Initially skeptical, he was captivated by her profile and they quickly hit it off. Their relationship, initially long distance, was fraught with red flags he overlooked. Eventually, he discovered she had a secret family. Confronted with her deceit, he ended the relationship and exposed her to her husband, leading to her downfall and divorce. Now let's get into the story. I met my girlfriend on a dating app 4 years ago. Before we were together, I would swipe through apps like Tinder all the time, mostly just to try and find someone from my phone. I would talk to someone now and then, but it never really panned out to be much. As soon as I saw my girlfriend's profile, I thought she was stunning. Her bio caught my attention too. I knew right away that I wanted her, so I swiped right and we matched. I took my shot and I messaged her, partially not even expecting her to respond. To my surprise, she messaged me back less than an hour later, and both of us really gelled during our first conversations. I was getting my hopes up a little. She was a beautiful girl, and we seemed to get along. After chatting for a little while, she told me that she was only in town for a week on business. I was bummed because I thought she was really awesome, and it sucked to hear that nothing would really come of our relationship. She told me that she wanted to meet me while she was there. So we got together at her hotel room and we hooked up. It was just as amazing as I thought it would be. So I gave her my number and told her that we should keep in touch. I didn't think at the time that we would be starting a long-distance relationship, but after she left, that's what it blossomed into. Even though we were a real friend, she had a very rigorous work schedule and our time off never seemed to coincide. Admittedly, I was somewhat blinded by my attraction to her. So there were a lot of things that I overlooked in the beginning of our relationship. For example, the first time that I ever visited her house, I noticed some weird things inside. There were 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom, which was a little strange considering she lived by herself. On top of that, there was a more masculine scented shaving cream under the sink as well. I asked her about the toothbrush, and she just told me that it was an old one that she hadn't thrown away. I believed her. I didn't really have any reason to think much else about it. I spent the rest of the weekend with her and ended up going back home, happier than ever. I genuinely liked her, and I wanted to move in with her because I saw a future with us. Every time I would broach the subject, she would tell me that it was too soon in our relationship. The first time I asked, it had been about a year. The second time, we'd been together for 3 years. Personally, 3 years is not a short amount of time for me. It felt like it was the next step in our relationship to live together. We had been long distance that entire time because I was waiting to move in with her. I ended up just deciding to move closer to her, regardless. If we couldn't live together, we could at least live in the same city. When I told her that I was moving, she acted like it was some surprise and told me that I shouldn't have done something like that for her. Her reaction kind of shocked me. I assumed she would be happy to have me closer to her. Even though I was living so close to her, I still only saw her occasionally. I understood that she was busy, but at the same time, I didn't quite get why we couldn't spend nights together at each other's apartments. After a few months of being closer, it started to click with me that something else might have been going on. I had read crazy, outlandish stories about people who lived double lives and carried on affairs, having families in different states, etc. I didn't want to believe that could be what was happening there, but my mind started to do its own thing. I learned the truth all because of a dumb joke that I made. My girlfriend and I were out to dinner, and we were having a good time. I asked her if she wanted to go back to her house after we finished eating, and she said no. Then I made a joke commenting on how she didn't want me to be there because of her husband and children. She got really silent for a moment and put her food down like she couldn't believe what I'd said. Then she said, "How long have you known?" I laughed for a moment, thinking she was making some deadpan joke back at me. After a couple of moments, I realized she was being serious. I asked for some clarity and she explained everything. She wasn't happy to do it, but I was glad everything was finally in the open. She told me that she did in fact have a husband and a son. She didn't get along with her mother-in-law, so whenever her husband wanted to take their son to see her, she would reach out to me. That was the opportunity she had to be with me. Everything made sense when she told me. That's why she didn't want me to move to her city, much less move in with her. It was why she was only sporadically available to see me. Right away, I told her that I wasn't okay with what she was doing, and I told her that I was done with her. I also insinuated that I was going to tell her husband about everything. She wished me luck with that, and we both left the restaurant. When I got back to my house to try and look into her life to find out who her husband was, I realized she gave me a fake name. The entire time I was in the house, I was with her. She was pretending to be somebody that she wasn't. She carried on a full affair, using a fake name and everything, and I never noticed. I eventually gave up trying to figure out who she really was. I hadn't even thought about it for a few months. My friend back home messaged me out of the blue one day with a screenshot of a Tinder profile. It was my ex-girlfriend. There was a different name associated with the account, and the age was different than why I knew her to be as well. The pictures and bio were exactly the same. My friend recognized her from pictures that I had shown him and asked me if we were still together or if we'd broken up. He thought that she might have been trying to cheat on me, so he wanted to make sure everything was good. I called him right away and explained everything to him. He was as shocked to find out about it as I was. After that, we came up with a little bit of a plan to try and catch her. He ended up matching with her, and they started talking. It's kind of funny, but I ended up telling him a lot of the things to say that I knew would work on her. She pulled the same thing that she had with me, telling him that she was only in town for a certain amount of time, and asked to meet up with him. All I needed my friend to do was send me the screenshots from her Tinder profile and possibly get a good look at her ID when she wasn't looking. The last part was going to be pretty difficult. I waited patiently for any news about what was happening. About 2 hours into the date that they were supposed to have, my friend texted me with a photo of her ID. I know there is a huge privacy concern, but I wasn't going to do anything with it other than look up her husband. I had her name, her real address, and all the information I needed to find her. I searched for her online, and lo and behold, found out that she had a real estate business with her husband. They were prominent members of their community. Both of them even served as chairs in the homeowners association. She had a lot to lose, and I was about to take it all for her. I knew I had a couple of days before she would be coming back to the city, so I reached out to her husband as quickly as I could to try and meet up with him. I didn't know what to say, so I sent him a message with all of the information. It was kind of unbelievable, and I didn't really even expect him to listen to everything I had to say. Thankfully, I had some evidence that I could attach in the form of our text message exchanges, as well as the Tinder profile, and some pictures she and I had swapped over the years. It took a few hours, but he eventually responded and agreed to meet up with me. We met at a coffee shop the following morning, and he looked like he wanted to tear my head off of my body. I swore to him that I knew nothing about him or his family. I think after a few minutes he believed me. He even confessed that there were some signs that she was having an affair that he overlooked for the sake of his own family. Given the extent of how far she went, I think she proved herself to be completely untrustworthy. That was probably what really opened his eyes. I told him that he deserved better than her. She was clearly a monster for what she'd done. I could hardly wrap my mind around how selfish her actions were. I gave him everything I could help him if he decided he wanted to pursue a divorce. I even told him that if he needed someone to talk to about it without judging him, I was there. Surprisingly, he actually took me up on that offer, and we chatted about it quite a bit while he was going through his divorce. Over everything they went through, it was clear that I wasn't even the first guy she had an affair with. It was some way for her to escape the responsibilities of motherhood and her business without consequence at the time. Unfortunately for her, it all backfired. After their divorce, their joint business went under. However, the husband was able to continue representing a lot of people from their neighborhood. Everybody knew what happened. And she was ostracized from most of the community. She ended up moving into a one-bedroom apartment and has an entry-level position at another firm in a different county.